Hey, what's up, insiders? This is Harrison and Whatley here from Actionable Insights. We are here with another Price List Update Summary as part of the Plus video series. Here we have February 20. And as you can see, I have the same line items and two estimates prepared here. The ones on the left are using the January 2020 San Diego price list, and the ones on the right are using the February. So we're moving forward in time from left to right, January to February. In the middle, I have brought up the e-service centers link, what Xactimate puts out as the price list update summary. Now, in contrast to January, when there were 12 new line items, you'll see that there is a whopping grand total of 0 new line items in February. So
I think that's the first time in years, man. I'm going back to 2016. I don't think I can remember a month with zero. Can you?
not off the top of my head, but somebody out there will find an example where no new line items were added. But I remember
It's really rare.
where there's one. But just because there were no new line items added doesn't mean that there weren't changes that were applied. And as part of the Plus Price List Update Summary series, we want to highlight important changes for you. Watley, you and I were just preparing for this video, and you were running some numbers on the first change here, the CLN STD modified sketch attributes. Can you talk about what you just discovered and what they mean by modified sketch attributes?
Well, in the spirit of this price list update summary review that we do, and we've been publishing for 4 years, I like to keep track of some of the obscure changes, and it would be easy to look over like, oh, they modified the sketch attributes. That doesn't mean anything. But whether you're an adjuster or whether you're a contractor, that can have a significant difference to your bottom line, because unfortunately, they have diametrically different ways of making money. So I thought I would get underneath the hood of this thing. So what I like to do when I see a sketch attribute update is I create a square room 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet tall, and then I start running my variables against it. And so when I did that in January, it ended up coming to I got a quantity here of 599.97. And then when I did in February, it did an even 600. So all they were doing was, yeah, they just resolved like a minute rounding error. And so
Got it.
now it's at 600. So kind of immaterial, but no, we're keeping an eye on those modified sketch attribute updates.
Got it. Whenever I see in these prices updates that Xactmate puts out, whenever I see modified labor component yield, that to me is interesting. Anytime they're changing yields, that means it's also going to affect the price. One thing that we talk about in our Xactimate curriculum and our private training engagements is that there is an inverse relationship between price and yield. So if price were to go up, then yield goes down, or vice versa. If yield goes up, price goes down. So there is that inverse relationship. So when I see that Xact modified a labor component yield, especially specifically in the removal assembly, I got really interested. So I chose two here: cork floor, solid tile, and parquet flooring. On the left side, I have January. On the right side, I have February. Let's take a look at this parquet flooring. I'm going to come to the unit price here, and I'm going to hit the I so I can pull up some information. I'm going to come to the unit price here for February, hit the I, and look at some information here. I'm going to first click edit on both of these so I can take a look at the actual direct yield to see what was changed here. And as you can see on the left side, I have January here. The direct yield for the removal of parquet flooring was 21.5 square feet per hour. But they've actually reduced the direct yield from 21.5 to 16. So what happens when you reduce yield? That means the price of that line item goes up. So you can see from January to February in the San Diego 2020 price lists, it went from 314 per unit to 422 per unit, an increase of what, 1.08 overall, $1.08 per square foot for the removal.
Yeah, but I like to think in terms of percentages, pretty significant, maybe
Yeah,
25%.
yeah, that's a huge difference in my mind when it comes to just modifying yield from 21 and a half square feet per hour to 16, just saying, hey, our workers on site, on the ground, removing this parquet flooring, it's not as productive as Xact originally had written it for. Therefore, based on feedback provided by the industry, Xactware has reduced the yield of the removal when it comes to parquet flooring, cork flooring, and these other flooring line items here, which has actually increased the price.
Yeah, and so hats off to them for doing it, man. These guys do a lot of work, even when they don't issue new line items. Like that was a lot of work. So they had to query several different providers, do a bunch of qualitative analysis and go, okay, yeah, we are going to have to update the yield in this particular amount in a defensible way. It's impressive that they bothered to do this for their 19.7 thousand line items on a near monthly basis.
100%. The next thing that I saw that kind of stood out to me in these various changes was right here, MTL PNLC modified text in the note field to clarify Xactware recommends users verify the labor trade yield and pricing with their roofing only estimates. And so what I did here is I go back to the item image for MTL PNLC. I'm going to bring it up here, go to item image, bring it up here on the right. I've got January on the left, February on the right. And as you can see here, what was added is right here. Xactware recommends users verify the labor trade yields, pricing, etc., to determine which item is most representative to their roofing only estimates. While you and I have talked about before, we enjoy these line items, especially when Exact says in some fashion, please verify and or update as applicable. Because Xactimate's doing its best to find a regional price to reflect the associated cost of performing that activity in the field in a property insurance environment. But not all of their pricing and line items are perfect, and they know that, and they are actively telling users, contractors, and adjusters to verify that this labor trade yield and pricing represents the activity that's trying to be performed with this line item.
Yeah, but I found that it's less about like their inability to do the complete research, and it's more about it's a line item that varies wildly per region. And so a good example of that is like DMOPU. They've done the research. They did it. They used to do that line item totally different in ways that we don't have time to get into. But
That's
it's so different from municipality to municipality. Like the most practical thing is to say, you know what, you guys just verify it given that particular region, because it's impractical for them to do anything else.
DMOPU being the hauling debris line item, one of the most common line items in property insurance claims.
Yeah.
So obviously you have the MTL here. I wanted to jump to the RFG 300 because there's a lot of questions about RFG, et cetera. And I have here RFG 2, 3, 4, 5 with the star, which really means all related line items in the RFG 300, et cetera category. Added text to the note field of the replacement definition to clarify that item pricing reflects local mailing requirements. And what that actually looks like when you click the item image and open up the additional item information, you'll see here under the note that they've added in February a new sentence in the very beginning. Pricing reflects local mailing code requirements. So Whatley, if you could help us understand here, why did Exact feel that adding this sentence, pricing reflects local mailing code requirements, why was this a warranted addition or at least a clarification to the additional item information of the RFG 300 line item?
All right, two qualifiers here. I can't be sure, so there's a little conjecture here. 1, 2, not an expert as it relates to roofing in high wind areas. That said, I think it's reasonable for me to conclude that high wind area building departments were requiring a certain amount of nails per 3-tab sheet, and roofing contractors were probably systemically submitting estimates that included an add for line item. They were maybe making it themselves, etc., for the additional line item concessions, for the additional nailing concessions. And so the pricing department is doing is they're attempting to clarify, like, listen, we're doing top-down feedback, which I think they do a really good job of as it relates to roofers anyhow. They're saying, hey, we're querying the local roofers in that area that are performing that function. And so those roofers in that area are already including the 4 or 5 nails that would otherwise be warranted. So the most practical thing to do is not bill for an added additional line item, add for a line item for an extra nail or two. It's really trying to communicate that the pricing would already contemplate that already. So I'm not totally certain here, but I think it's likely that I'm on the right track.
Got it. The last things that stood out to me in these line items here was this discussion of modified labor minimum of all categories, modified labor component of the replacement and included field to reflect 3 hours of labor. So 4 of the line items here in this section, when it's talking about modifying hours or labor yields, again, is relating to these 4 labor minimums. They've got aluminum window labor minimum, patio door, vinyl window, and wood window. And if you go into the unit price here, and I hit I, you'll see in the definition, In January of 2020, it said this minimum for an aluminum window was 2.5 hours. The labor minimum was 2.5 hours. If you go now to the right side for February, it says included 3 hours of labor. And actually, I'll jump over to the unit price with the eye here specifically to show you that it says includes 3 hours instead of 2.5 hours. So they've added a half hour to the labor minimums of aluminum windows, patio doors, vinyl windows, and wood windows, which I think is interesting that they've reflected or at least realized that, hey, these activities require more labor on a regular basis as a minimum that we've historically put in there, 2.5. So we're bumping it up to 3 accordingly.
I don't know if it was really like quantitative in that context as it relates to labor that would be deployed in the field. Like, I don't think that that's what's happening here. Conjecture, Harrison, but
100%.
I think these trades have started to recognize that they can't make any money unless they can bill for a 3-hour minimum. And every trade that comes out to my house and they bill for a little bit of this, a little bit of that, I always get hit with a 3-hour labor minimum. Sometimes that contemplates drive time, sometimes it doesn't. That'll take us down a road that will derail this whole call. But the point is, 3 hours is emerging as a set standard within the specialty trades for performing any function on site. And I think that's more likely what's getting represented here. And I think that that will be prolific throughout the price list, and you'll continue to see changes of that nature for a 3-hour labor minimum.
Got it. I love it. I mean, that's the industry reality, right? And it's not necessarily regional. That's somewhat nationwide. And Xact's updating their own software and line items to reflect, hey, these things are changing in the industry at large, and we want to make sure that we're reflecting what's happening out there.
These trades are getting more and more expensive, man. I was just looking at some of the data for all these JDs, these Juris Doctorates, these lawyers that are coming out of school. We are producing in America 30% surplus of lawyers that will never find a job as an Esquire, pass the bar, and actually go to work in that capacity. That was something I arbitraged early in my career. As that's how I built my GC firm, right? I was surrounding myself with 5 attorneys, and I built a pretty credible estimating department because there was a surplus of them.
The attorneys were your estimators.
That's right. Never sued anybody. Was really proud of that. But they were trained to build a case and go and to submit something to carriers that was credible, consistent, and defensible.
Right, and defend an accurate scope.
You got it. But here's what's happening in the trades, man. We are not training, our school systems are not training folks to get involved in the trades, and the trades are continuing to get more and more expensive, especially the more specialized trades. And so I think you're going to continue to see these trends in this space because they're just underserved. Like, should a linesman for SDG&E be making $165,000 a year right now? I don't know, Harrison. I don't want to take judgment against that, but that's currently what they're making because there's an outsized demand. Is it weird that I have a friend who flies commercially for jets that you and I fly on a monthly basis, and he's only making $48,000 a year? Yeah, that's weird. Why? Because there's that many folks that want to fly jets, and they'll do it for darn near free, even though they have 300 souls behind them that they're responsible for. So it's a really interesting time to be tracking these trades and how the price list and the pricing team is trying to track it, because there is outsized demand for electricians and plumbers and even the more obscure trades like window installers, right? Glass work installers, like for a shower surround. Those folks are making incredible money. These are 6-figure tradesmen now, and they can go to school for 6 months, and they can go and apprentice for a year and a half, 2 years, and be off to the races as a journeyman. I'm so enamored with the opportunity there and how underserved our industry is. And I hope that we as restorers and property insurance professionals can guide our youth towards the trades, because there is a need and it's a noble career and you can make great money as it stands.
I love it, man. Love it. We've talked about it a lot over the past few years. Finishing up this February 2020 price list update summary, coming down here to the material components that were added. Just a metal fence post related to an existing line item. And then the miscellaneous changes section that we'd like to address here. Not going to touch the remapping postal codes, go Canada. but I will talk about the worker wage portion of the retail labor rate. So you'll see Arkansas, Arizona, California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Maine, New York, and Washington itself, the state, were all updated the worker wage portions of the retail labor rate. Exact has put out a retail labor rate worksheet for you as a restorer to be able to give them direct feedback as to your retail labor rate in your region. That's another channel that was introduced last year. It's a new channel of pricing feedback to be able to give to Exact. And if you know anything about our curriculum and what we teach, we tell people, be giving that pricing feedback in the method that makes the most sense for you. You can read the Xactimate History in the Future, the white paper, an insider report on our website at getinsights.org to understand more of the pricing folklore of around pricing feedback, or watch my Exact Hacks video on pricing feedback to kind of get a better idea of what's the best ways or most impactful ways for me to be giving pricing feedback to Exact to affect the regional price list in my area to make sure that it is as accurate as possible.
Yeah, that video is really good. It's cool that Pine, commissioned that one recently too. That's one of the best videos I've seen come out of the pricing department in years.
Yeah, that would be an expert tip. Greg Pine put together, I think, a 2-3 minute video. It's not all that long. Search XPERT tips for pricing feedback, and you'll have something that was put out, I think, in January or something for 2020 as to what are the best ways to provide pricing feedback to Pine in the pricing department on a regular basis.
Yeah.
With that, this has been the February 2020 Price List Update Summary. Hope you've enjoyed. If you haven't already, check us out at getinsights.org. Please like, share, and subscribe this video series on whatever platform that you're finding this on. We're happy to help and do our duty in preserving the health of the property insurance ecosystem. So thank you, and we'll see you guys again for March real soon.